4 hours ago, something in our solar system did what it is not supposed to do, and the odds of a natural explanation are being quoted at 0.000004%. That is why I need you focused, because this isn't a story about a comet acting odd. It's a story about an object 3I Atlas stepping outside the rules we use to predict the sky. Until this morning, 3I Atlas looked like a standard hyperbolic visitor, an icy body from deep space on a one-time swing around the Sunday. Its path was mapped. Its perihelion was calculated within a few thousand kilometers. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory had the trajectory. ESA was confident. Everything was familiar right up to 9:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, when the Deep Space Network received a return ping that should not exist. In exactly 4 hours, 3I Atlas didn't merely speed up, and it didn't just wobble into a slightly different curve. It shifted sideways relative to Earth by roughly 300,000 miles. Stop and picture that distance. The Earth-Moon gap is about 238,000 miles. This object covered more than that in the time it takes to fly from New York to Los Angeles. A gravitational assist doesn't do that. Outgassing doesn't do that. When comets warm, jets of vapor can push them, but the effect is a gentle nudge that shows up as tiny orbital changes over weeks or months, not a clean lateral jump that reads like a controlled maneuver. The mass estimate being used is on the order of 33 billion tons. To relocate that much material that far, that fast, takes energy on a scale that doesn't fit comet physics as we know it. We're taught celestial mechanics is clockwork. Planets orbit, comets fall inward, gravity writes the script. But gravity does not make 300,000-mile sidesteps in 4 hours. Gravity bends paths. It doesn't zigzag them. So the question keeping people at Harvard and Caltech awake is not whether something happened. The telemetry from Goldstone backs it up. The question is how, and, more importantly, why? Because the shift was not random drift. When you resolve the vector, 3I Atlas moved toward the ecliptic plane of Earth. It placed itself on an intercept geometry that was not predicted yesterday. It is closer, it is faster, and the direction of that correction carries a hint of intention that should make any scientist uneasy. I ran the standard equations of motion. I pushed the measurements through every conservative model we trust. The output keeps landing on the same verdict: impossible. And yet, the instruments keep returning the same answer. To understand why this single maneuver is shaking astrophysics, you have to go back to the moment the anomaly first whispered that something was wrong. It began quietly at 5:12 a.m. Eastern. The Deep Space Network's dish at Goldstone, California DSS 14 was tracking 3I Atlas using a carrier wave. This is routine. We transmit, the signal reflects, and the time delay gives distance, while Doppler shift reveals velocity. For weeks, those numbers were predictable. The object was inbound on a hyperbolic track from interstellar space, destined to loop around the Sun and leave forever. Then, at 5:14, the return signal changed. The Doppler signature spiked, the frequency compressed, and in plain language, the object suddenly screamed toward us. Engineers at JPL did what cautious engineers should do: assume the machine is wrong. They suspected calibration error, software fault, maybe atmospheric distortion. Massive objects resist sudden changes. Inertia is not optional. So they rebooted systems and recalibrated the receivers. But when they checked again at 6:30, the anomaly hadn't vanished. It had doubled. If this were a sensor glitch, the error would look random. It would scatter across the data like static. But this was clean, consistent, and precise. The updated telemetry showed that 3I Atlas had altered its velocity vector by 42 kilometers per second perpendicular to its original orbit. That is not drift. That is not thermal expansion. That is a sideways burn. NASA did not go public. They did something more serious. They called the European Space Agency. While Goldstone was measuring radio Doppler data, ESA turned optical systems toward the predicted coordinates. The Gaia mission and ground stations in Spain locked onto the patch of sky where the object should now appear if the shift were real. At 8:45 a.m., Madrid confirmed it. The object was not where it was supposed to be. Radio and optical measurements matched perfectly. 2 continents, 2 different detection methods, 1 impossible location. This is where natural explanations start to collapse. The first theory raised was outgassing. We have seen non-gravitational acceleration before. In 2017, Oumuamua sparked similar debates when it showed unusual motion. The explanation proposed was jets of sublimating hydrogen or water ice acting like tiny thrusters. That mechanism is real. It works. But it does not work like this. To push a 3 billion-ton object 300,000 miles off its path in 4 hours using gas jets, you would need to eject roughly 10% of its total mass almost instantly. Picture a mountain vaporizing a tenth of itself in a focused blast. If that had happened, 3I Atlas would now be the brightest object in our night sky. There would be a massive coma, a visible tail stretching millions of miles. Amateur astronomers would not need sophisticated equipment. It would be obvious. Instead, when the James Webb Space Telescope examined it, there was nothing, no expanding cloud, no violent ejection, no infrared bloom. The object remained compact and dark. Energy was applied, but without the thermodynamic mess that normally accompanies such force. And then it became stranger. Around 9 a.m., amateur astronomers in Australia and Chile began posting observations on the Minor Planet Center forums. Before the 4-hour window, 3I Atlas had been tumbling chaotically. That is normal. Most natural bodies spin irregularly, like a poorly thrown football. But after the shift, the light curve changed. The tumbling stopped. The object stabilized into a precise, rhythmic rotation. In space, there is no air to create friction. Chaotic rotation does not neatly settle in a vacuum unless there is a massive collision or active internal control. No collision was detected. No debris field appeared, yet the spin locked into order. So now we have 3 anomalies occurring within 240 minutes. A lateral displacement of 300,000 miles. No visible propulsion or mass loss. And sudden rotational stabilization. Individually, any one of these would redefine comet science. Together, they form a pattern. Then comes the trajectory update. When scientists calculate a comet's path, they focus on the minimum orbit intersection distance, how close it approaches Earth. Yesterday, that distance was comfortable, millions of miles. After the shift, that calculation changed. Using the revised vectors from Goldstone and Gaia, the simulations were rerun. The result was unsettlingly clear. 3I Atlas is no longer passing casually through our inner solar system. It has adjusted toward Earth's orbital plane. If this correction were random, the probability of it pushing the object directly toward an Earth intercept geometry would be astronomically small. It would be like rolling dice and landing on 6 1,000 times consecutively. The new trajectory is cleaner and sharper than gravity alone would allow. Something happened in those 4 hours, and whatever it was, it moved the unknown significantly closer to us. Now we have to examine this not as an anomaly, but as a physics problem. Because what occurred did not just bend expectations, it broke rules. In celestial mechanics, we rely on laws that have held for centuries. Kepler's laws describe orbital motion with remarkable accuracy. Newton refined them, Einstein expanded them. Together, they explain every tracked comet, asteroid, and planet in our catalog. But 3I Atlas appears to have violated the second law in a way that cannot be ignored. When an object falls toward the Sun, gravity converts potential energy into kinetic energy. It speeds up along its orbital path. That is normal. What is not normal is changing direction sideways at 42 kilometers per second while maintaining forward velocity near 87 kilometers per second. That kind of vector change requires enormous energy. Running the numbers using the estimated mass of 33 billion tons produces an energy requirement comparable to the combined yield of the world's nuclear arsenals detonated simultaneously. If a natural collision had delivered that energy, telescopes would have recorded a flash brighter than the full moon. The object would likely have shattered. There was no flash, no infrared spike, no fragmentation. Instead, the object remained intact. That suggests internal cohesion far stronger than a loose aggregation of ice and rock. Most comets are rubble piles. They do not withstand extreme lateral acceleration without breaking apart. Yet 3I Atlas survived forces that should have torn it into debris. Then there is timing. The maneuver occurred as the object crossed the orbit of Mars. In orbital mechanics, if you want to alter a trajectory toward Earth efficiently, the optimal correction point is far from your target. A small change early produces a large effect later. The shift happened at the mathematically optimal position for adjusting toward Earth's orbital plane. If this were random outgassing, nature selected the perfect moment, perfect direction, and precise magnitude of force. The statistical likelihood approaches zero. So we are forced to ask an uncomfortable question. Is 3I Atlas truly a comet? Or are we observing something else? Because 4 hours ago it was tumbling, inert, and predictable. Now it is stabilized, redirected, and advancing with precision. And what followed? The maneuver deepened the mystery. 45 minutes after settling into its new trajectory, the object emitted something unexpected. At 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia detected a signal. Comets do emit radio noise as volatile materials sublimate. That sound is chaotic like static, but this was not static. It was narrowband, focused, pulsed. The signal repeated every 11 seconds. Nature produces pulsars that blink hundreds of times per second. 11 seconds is not a typical astrophysical rhythm. It is deliberate enough to raise questions. Within each pulse, there was modulation, slight frequency shifts that resembled structured data rather than random noise. Interference was ruled out. Satellite contamination was checked. Even mundane sources were eliminated. The Doppler shift of the signal matched 3I Atlas perfectly. The emission was moving with the object, which leaves two possibilities. 1. This is an unknown natural astrophysical phenomenon occurring coincidentally after a course correction. 2. The object is transmitting. If it is transmitting, then 3I Atlas is not a passive rock, it is active. And if it is active, the maneuver was not accidental. It was an activation. The beam is not broadcasting in all directions. It forms a tight cone aimed toward Earth. As the object rotates, the beam sweeps across our planet like a lighthouse. That implies targeting. And now the scenario shifts from observation to event. Because if something out there is listening, a signal just left our immediate cosmic neighborhood. And that raises a final, critical question. What is inside it? That is the question briefing rooms are now wrestling with, because the answer determines whether this is a breakthrough in physics or the beginning of a completely different chapter in human history. Let's establish what we know with certainty. 3I. Atlas shifted 300,000 miles against solar gravitational expectations. It stabilized its chaotic spin in a vacuum where no friction exists. It emitted a repeating, directed, narrowband signal aimed toward Earth. These are not rumors. They are documented observations from independent systems across multiple agencies. If this is natural, then we have uncovered a force or mechanism not described in current models. That alone would rewrite textbooks. It would mean our understanding of momentum exchange, energy transfer, and possibly even gravity is incomplete. But if this is artificial, then we are not witnessing a new comet behavior. We are witnessing the arrival of an object built with purpose. There is no comfortable middle ground. Right now, the object is traveling at approximately 87 kilometers per second relative to the Sunday. It is closing distance rapidly. In less than 14 hours from the last confirmed update, it will cross the orbital radius of Mars. In 3 weeks, it will be visible through advanced amateur telescopes. The data stream is active. Observatories worldwide are tracking it continuously. The 11-second pulse has not stopped. That pulse is what shifts this from anomaly to urgency. The Green Bank detection was only the first confirmation. Within hours, other radio facilities attempted verification. The signal strength is faint but consistent. The beam pattern suggests directionality. It is not isotropic radiation like thermal emission. It behaves like a transmission array. And here is something else that complicates the picture. The signal is not random within each pulse. When analysts break down the waveform, they observe frequency modulation that appears structured. It is subtle, but it repeats. Patterns inside patterns. That does not automatically mean language. It does not prove intelligence, but it does mean organization. The rotation period of 3I Atlas is now synchronized with the pulse interval. Every 11 seconds, as the object completes a specific rotational phase, the signal intensifies briefly before fading again. That synchronization should not exist in a tumbling, natural body. It suggests alignment between internal mechanics and emission. We must also consider the physical resilience demonstrated during the maneuver. Most comets are fragile aggregates, loosely bound by gravity and minor cohesive forces. A sharp lateral acceleration of 42 kilometers per second should have introduced internal stress beyond structural tolerance. Instead, the object maintained integrity. This implies one of two things. Either it is composed of an unknown ultra-dense natural material, or it possesses engineered reinforcement. Speculation must remain disciplined. There is still no visual evidence of artificial surfaces. Optical imagery shows a dark, elongated body with low albedo. It does not display metallic reflection or geometric panels, but absence of visible structure does not eliminate internal structure. Meanwhile, trajectory simulations continue updating. Current projections indicate no immediate collision risk with Earth. The intercept vector aligns with Earth's orbital plane, not Earth itself, at least for now. But that vector alignment alone was not predicted before the shift. In physics, coincidences of this scale demand scrutiny. The global scientific community is responding cautiously. No official declaration suggests artificial origin. No press release uses that language. Public statements describe unexpected non-gravitational acceleration. That is the safe phrasing. Behind closed doors, the modeling continues. Because if this object truly corrected its course, stabilized itself, and began transmitting in sequence, then what we are observing is not random motion. It is behavior. And behavior implies system. The next development may clarify which explanation survives scrutiny, because if the signal changes, or if another maneuver occurs, the debate will narrow rapidly. And that moment may come sooner than anyone expected, because patterns rarely remain static. Since the initial detection, analysts have been studying the 11-second pulse in real time, feeding it into signal decomposition software normally reserved for deep space communication experiments. The goal is simple: determine whether the modulation contains encoded information or whether it is merely a natural resonance amplified by geometry. So far, the data resists easy classification. The pulse interval remains fixed at 11 seconds, not 10.8, not 11.3, precisely 11. Within each emission window, the carrier frequency drifts slightly upward, then downward, forming a symmetrical waveform envelope. That regularity is difficult to dismiss as chaotic sublimation noise. To test natural hypotheses, astrophysicists modeled internal cavity resonance. If 3I Atlas contains hollow chambers created by uneven ice sublimation, trapped gas pockets could oscillate, but for resonance to repeat at exact intervals, synchronized with rotational stabilization, immediately after a massive trajectory correction stretches plausibility. Next, they tested magnetohydrodynamic interactions. Could solar wind interacting with residual ionized gases create periodic bursts? Simulations show fluctuations, but not narrowband repetition with consistent phase locking. The deeper analysts dig, the more the signal behaves less like environmental noise and more like intentional emission. Meanwhile, tracking confirms the object's structural silhouette has not fractured. Infrared mapping shows minimal thermal anomaly. No exhaust plume, no expanding cloud. If propulsion occurred, it did so without the waste signature normally associated with thrust. One possible theoretical avenue involves directed energy manipulation, something beyond chemical propulsion. In speculative physics, advanced civilizations on the Kardashev scale could harness stellar energy directly. A civilization capable of managing even a fraction of a star's output could alter the trajectory of a comet-sized object without explosive byproducts. This is not an assertion, it is a boundary condition analysis. When conventional models fail, physics requires exploration of extreme possibilities before dismissing them. The timing of the shift remains mathematically optimal. When adjusting interplanetary intercept geometry, small vector changes far from the target produce dramatic differences downstream. The maneuver executed by 3I Atlas occurred precisely at that advantageous orbital phase. Coincidence once is unusual. Coincidence layered 3 times becomes statistically extraordinary. Public agencies remain measured in tone. Statements emphasize continued monitoring and low probability of impact. That is accurate based on current trajectory projections. But trajectory is not static if further adjustments occur. And that is the central concern. Because if one correction has already happened, the precedent exists for another. As of the latest update, 3I Atlas is approaching Mars' orbital radius. Observatories around the world are aligning instruments for continuous observation during this crossing. Any additional deviation will be detected quickly. The signal continues. 11 seconds. Pulse. Silence. 11 seconds. Pulse. Silence. It is steady, almost clinical in its precision. And here lies the philosophical weight of this event. If this is natural, we are witnessing a new category of astrophysical phenomenon that will reshape orbital mechanics theory. If it is artificial, then humanity is observing technology not built on Earth. Either outcome alters our understanding of our place in the cosmos, The clock is not hypothetical. At 87 kilometers per second, distance closes rapidly. In weeks, more amateur systems will verify optical characteristics. In months, gravitational interaction with inner solar bodies may provide additional data points. We are no longer asking whether something happened. We are waiting to see what happens next. And whatever that next development is, it will determine whether this remains a scientific anomaly or becomes the first confirmed sign that we are not alone in our engineering. Because the final variable has not yet been revealed. Intent, and intent becomes visible through action. If another action occurs, uncertainty will collapse into conclusion, and the world will have to respond accordingly because intent reveals itself through repetition and escalation. If 3I Atlas performs another maneuver, even a small correction, the statistical shield of coincidence disappears entirely. One unexplained shift challenges physics. Two would demand reclassification. As of now, the trajectory remains stable along the revised vector. No additional lateral movement has been detected since the initial 4-hour event. That silence is important. It suggests either a completed adjustment or a system awaiting the next program trigger. Meanwhile, decoding attempts intensify. Signal analysts are mapping the 11-second pulses against prime number sequences, binary structures, and spectral encoding frameworks used in human deep space transmissions. Early comparisons show no obvious binary language equivalent, but the modulation contains repeating substructures that cannot be easily attributed to random processes. The beam orientation remains aligned toward Earth's orbital position. As the object rotates, the signal sweeps across our planet in a predictable pattern, then returns. That geometry implies awareness of relative positioning because the beam width is narrow. A natural source would radiate in broader arcs. Even skeptics admit the directed quality is unusual. Still, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. No official body has labeled this artificial. Every agency maintains caution. That is responsible science. The burden of proof must remain high. But here is the unavoidable reality. 3 independent anomalies occurred sequentially. Massive lateral displacement, rotational stabilization, directed periodic transmission. Each event compounds the improbability of a purely natural explanation. The remaining unknown is payload. If 3I Atlas is a probe, what does it carry? Instrumentation? Observation arrays? Autonomous systems? We do not see external appendages. Optical imaging shows a dark, elongated mass, but internal architecture remains invisible. If it is natural, what internal process allowed energy injection without visible exhaust? What material composition prevented fragmentation under extreme lateral acceleration? These questions now occupy simulation clusters across research institutions. Time narrows the window for speculation. Within weeks, refined optical imaging may reveal surface detail. Spectroscopic analysis may identify unexpected alloys or artificial isotopic ratios. Gravitational interactions during its inner solar system passage may reveal mass distribution anomalies. Data will accumulate, and data will decide, but there is a psychological dimension unfolding as well. Humanity has always looked outward, wondering whether intelligence exists beyond Earth. We have sent probes, transmitted signals, and scanned radio frequencies for decades. If 3I Atlas is artificial, then the search has inverted. We are not transmitting outward, we are being observed. That possibility carries weight beyond physics. Yet caution remains essential. Natural phenomena have surprised us before. Pulsars were once labeled potential alien beacons before being understood as neutron stars. History warns against premature conclusions. Still, the alignment of events here is statistically extraordinary. Right now, the object continues forward at 87 kilometers per second. The pulse repeats. The trajectory holds. The world watches. We stand at a crossroads between two realities. Either we are about to expand physics into territory never explored, or we are witnessing the first engineered object ever detected entering our inner solar system from interstellar space. There is no dramatic music in observatories, only data streams and quiet calculation. But make no mistake, this is one of the most consequential monitoring events in modern astrophysics. If you want to stay ahead of every confirmed update, every decoded signal shift, and every trajectory refinement as it happens, subscribe now and stay connected, because the next data release may redefine everything we thought we knew about the universe.